Hello, everyone. Okay, finished reading chapter 6, part 3. Hopefully, I can get through the end of this in this session. All right, so Kimberly's thoughts raced, but she tried to drive home a little more safely. What do I need? Remembering Claudia's criterion. Always a consequence. She reviewed her life from end to end looking for consequences. She started with waking up. She liked mornings and was naturally an early riser. She jumped up cheerfully, anticipating her run on the beach. Unless she'd gone to bed past 11, then she was tired and groggy no matter how late she slept. That's the consequence, she thought. I need to go to bed by 11. Duh. On the morning after staying late at the office for month end, she dragged herself out of bed and through her life. For at least the next 2 days, she recalled. Big consequence. What if I rested the day after? Would it take less time to recover? She thought about her team in the days following the big push. They too were groggy, cranky, and prone to making mistakes, which I don't handle well, she thought. I'm more likely to emasculate men when I'm tired. Another big consequence. The month-end jam wipes us all out, and we expect a function normally afterwards. That gave her an idea for a deal she'd like to make with Raul. And not a moment too soon. As month end was later this week, maybe he'll go for it. We'll all be more productive and effective. Thinking about how they would be if she could negotiate recovery time made her think about her date that night. How do I want to be? The centered, open, and playful me, she decided. But what has me be that way? She began a mental list. Centered comes from a good run, ocean time, being clear about what I want, and bubble baths. Open comes from remembering Claudia's lessons. He's not a hairy woman, he's a provider. Playful comes from, she'd never thought about this quality before hanging around Karen and Mike, recalling their playful interactions. I'm naturally serious. What has me be playful? When have I ever been playful? She thought of the day at the office when she won one of her 3 new dresses. The feel of the soft fabric, the movement of her skirt on her legs, the vibrant teal color. She'd felt light on her feet and flirty. Playful, she realized and remembered seeing the look on Jack's face, reflected in the glass of the framed award. Yes, perfect thing to wear tonight. Approaching her condo, she noticed the hour. She had plenty of time for both, a run on the beach and a bubble bath. Yay! Karen settled at a table with iced tea and a sandwich and diligently attacked her notes. She knew this was partly to avoid wondering what Mike needed that he'd given up on getting from her. She didn't know why, but the very idea terrified her. Munching on her sandwich, she reviewed Claudia's assignment. Homework. Ask yourself, who do I want to be? What qualities, capacities, abilities, ways of interacting, etc. Figure out what I need to be who I want to be. Figure out what I need to be who I want to be. Look especially for physical needs that give me my best qualities. Sleep, exercise, good food, nature, etc. When am I naturally expressing my best favorite qualities? When can't I be who I want to be? Next, she sorted through the main points of her notes, looking at her flip chart information. Men's relationships to their needs is immediate. They're critical and urgent. I need, I get. Because single focus has them be unaware until the breaking point. May seem selfish, but isn't necessarily. A provider thinks, I'm no good to anyone until I get. Women's relationship to survival needs at the last possible moment has us wait until we're starving, exhausted, dying to pee. Women's relationships to quality of life needs, it would be nice, has us too often go without. She didn't write down Claudia's reference to making babies. Karen had indeed waited until the last possible moment, but not on purpose. Her partnership with Mike had been more important and he hadn't been ready until recently. But that's probably why I was especially stressed out about getting pregnant. Waiting until the last possible moment doesn't lend a woman much grace. Correlating needs being met with what we can be for others will help make sure we meet our needs. Men's relationships to our needs. You need, I get. Providers are caregivers. I want to change the future. Man quote, I want to do everything I can do so that she can be what could never be. Wow. Demanding what we feel we deserve or can justify doesn't work. 2 possible responses to demand: resist or submit. Both create resentment and distance. Men don't really know what we need. They'll give us what they think we need unless we inform them differently. Tell them using the need word and specify what it will provide. So what I need and what it will provide. She thought, that's 2 of the hero language words. Wonder what the other 3 are. Reviewing her notes brought Karen back to what she was avoiding. To keep busy, she formulated another flip chart page. Men have 3 types of needs. Survival needs, eventually die without. Quality of life needs, allow them to be the person qualities they want to be. Needs they've given up on getting. Cost, passion, dedication, generosity, connection, loyalty. May eventually go looking for them. Her notes, sandwich and coffee finished, she resolved to face her fears. Gathering her things up, she kept wondering, what does Mike need that he's given up on getting? As she started the car, it dawned on her, what have I given up on getting? The answer was immediate. My heart's desires. Wow. Jack was more nervous than he wanted to admit. He didn't have the nickname Mr. Cool for nothing. He never panicked. A useful talent dealing with financial markets, and he really showed discomfort. Kimberly rattled him like no woman he'd ever met. It must be the combination of her body and her being. Something about her confidence, authenticity, or vulnerability. It frustrated him that he couldn't identify the precise word. Her physical shape was his type, causing a titillating imbalance of delight and desire. Her natural short-haired beauty fit his sense of order and economy. Except, he reminded himself, those brilliant blue eyes are a wonderful extravagance. And, he thought with a smile, her curves are another. Unlike other beauties he'd known, her physical attractiveness was upstaged by her mystery. A straightforward woman is more intriguing than any attempt to enthrall, he concluded. Jack had always been drawn to strong, successful women, but he never succeeded at making them happy. Kimberly's reactions to him lately made him think that might be possible at last. He found a parking place down the street from her condominium complex. As he found her code and pushed the buzzer to enter, he felt relieved that she lived in a secure building. Why am I protective of her, he asked himself, then noted, that's another first. Kimberly opened the door with a sweater on her arm and her purse in her hand. He was mildly disappointed because he wanted to see her place, for the obvious reason of finding out if he felt at home there. You're getting ahead of yourself, pal. He noticed her clothing and smiled. I was hoping to see you in that dress again, he said candidly. Her mouth and eyes smiled with equal honesty. I thought you might, she pointed to her sweater. I wasn't sure if I needed this. He took it from her and draped it over his arm. It depends on if you want to eat inside or outside. Let's take it with us just in case. When they got to the sidewalk, he was compelled to walk between her and the street and again noticed how protective he felt. Arriving at his BMW sedan, he opened her door, shifted her sweater to the other arm, and guided her in by the small of her back. The momentary touch felt intimate and natural. Depositing her sweater in the back seat, he settled in and resisted the urge to check her seatbelt. Kimberly commented lightly, I wondered if you'd bring me your famous Porsche. He didn't detect a note of diversion. He relaxed and offered, most people are more comfortable in this car. I can see why. I like BMWs too, she answered, but I'd like a ride in the other someday. Roll was gone on and on about it, and she paused. I like fast. He laughed. Delightful. Do you mean you want to go for a ride? Or drive it? She gave that question more thought than it seemed to deserve, finally saying, it would probably be more polite to ask for a ride. It being such an expensive car and all, but truthfully, I'd like both of them. While her answer intrigued him, he had to focus on getting through Saturday evening traffic. Ross said you're into fresh food. I have a place in mind. Do you mind Italian? Her face lit up. Fresh makes me feel healthy, and Italian and French food are my favorite, she replied. Good, then we're all set. Unless you want to eat outside, then I'll have to make a call. She pursed her lips in a way that made him suddenly want to touch them, but he had to keep his eyes on the road. After a moment, she answered, Inside, I think. Is the place you're planning on quiet enough to hear each other? He nodded, gratified that he'd chosen an intimate restaurant. Yes, and I reserved a booth. I love booths, she responded happily. 3 points, he thought. Fresh, Italian, booth. Hope she likes the ocean. Ooh, who doesn't? Kimberly was surprised about how relaxed she felt. Jack's deep voice, barrel-chested masculinity, which used to intimidate her, now made her feel safe and protected. She liked that he walked down the street side, and when he lightly touched her back to help her into his car, a tingle ran up her spine. It wasn't scary, it was nice. Claudia said bringing out the best in women starts with making them feel safe. What will Jack bring out in me? She was glad she won the teal dress. His unconcealed pleasure made her feel pretty, and while the dress fit her waist and flowed around her the fullness of her hips, the boat-necked bodice modestly concealed her breasts. She felt feminine, but not sexy, a good compromise for her. They were sitting almost perpendicular in the half-moon booth facing the ocean. She sighed in contentment. She was glad they were here instead of at a table by the window. Neither across from each other nor directly beside felt good. Friendly, but not too close. In the past, she would have planned how to control the conversation, to avoid uncomfortable topics, and to determine if her date was a real candidate. Having already concluded Jack was too much older for a long-term relationship, she had been simply enjoying his company and the flow of their interaction. However, she was surprised by the first question he asked after they ordered dinner. Does anyone call you Kim, or is it always Kimberly? She had to think about that. My mother always called me Kimberly and insists that no nicknames, and my grandparents usually honor that, except occasionally my grandmother calls me Kimster. It's endearing, she smiled. I call her Graham Cracker. In return, she paused, considering. My best friend from childhood calls me Kimmy, or plain K. She noticed that she'd said from childhood. She never felt the need to qualify her description of Melissa as her best friend before. Is this distance permanent? But she was too intrigued by Jack's question to follow that train of thought any further. I have a new friend who calls me Kim, and it's fine. I'm not sure about you, though. Say it again, please. Kim, he said, then continued in different tones. Kim, hi, Kim. Yo, Kim, what's up, Kim? She laughed, enjoying his playfulness and feeling the name resonate in her chest. Or is it the warmth he adds, she wondered. The nickname felt light and fun and affectionate. I like it when you say it, she responded truthfully, but I'm curious. Why would you want to? With his shirt sleeves rolled up and his arms resting on the table, she noticed how thickly muscled his forearms were. Jack replied earnestly, I'm guessing from what you said about no sissy girls that your mother wanted to give you a serious handle to throw around in an intimidating world, and that was probably a good call. Obviously some names, but people had an immediate disadvantage. But you have enough stature as a person that your name doesn't have to work that hard anymore. He continued, I was thinking about who you've become lately. Is he starting to blush? And I wanted to call you something that reflected who you are to me now. She felt touched by his sensitivity and surprise. She responded slowly, I have grossly misjudged you. I'm sorry. He smiled kindly and cocked his head to the side, eyes playful. Let me guess. You thought I was a lecherous jerk, no pardon in the language, asshole, without a care in the world. A rich man who objectifies and uses women for his own selfish pleasure. Now it was her turn to blush and grimace. Was it that obvious? Yes, it was. His bushy eyebrows rose in punctuation. But, he added with a shrug in his broad shoulders, it was not totally undeserved. After the first time you blew me off, I took some pleasure in baiting you, I admit. He smiled and continued, and for most of my life I have been a jerk, an asshole who objectified women and sought to meet my needs without much concern for them or their feelings. Kimberly was taken aback by his confession. But then, what changed? Jack's eyes were serious now. You changed me. Kimberly only could only sit back and let it in. Searching his face, she noted the rugged handsomeness of his strong, slightly crooked nose, the cleft chin, the wide mouth. Finally, she asked, "How? How did I change you?" He straightened his silverware and water glass. After several long moments, he looked at her and said, "As you made the poor guy promise, Raul told me about the frog farming and your retirement from what he calls the castration club." She nodded, smiling at the term and glad to hear Raul had provided that explanation for her. "I can imagine that giving up that female-honored tradition means you discovered the consequences." He paused for agreement, and she nodded. "I've had my fair share of being emasculated. Besides the usual ways, as a wealthy man, I get treated like a bank account much of the time." He paused, and his eyebrows checked in with her again. She nodded in understanding, thinking, that must be awful. "I don't know if you talked about this with your grandmother's class, but there's a result of emasculating men that's the worst thing you can do to a man." He looked down at the back of his hands, his face suddenly sad. She sensed he wanted to ask her. Gently she gestured, "What's that?" Still looking at his hands, he replied with an edge to a deep force, "Make him not care." Still looking at his hands, he replied with an edge to his deep voice, "Make him not care." "Wow!" came out before she could stop. His head still tilted down, he looked at her from under his dark, bushy eyebrows. The intensity of his gray-green eyes startled her. "So that's what's changed you? Kim made me care again?" He held her gaze as she gulped. She made him care again. Jack watched her take in his last statement, his confession, his bare all. He felt naked and free. "I thought freedom lay in being unattached. Perhaps I was wrong." Kim's eyes had teared up and she was carefully dabbing them with a tissue. "She doesn't have enough makeup on to mess it up." He took in her pale skin, glad she hadn't concealed its radiance under some stupid, flawless crap. "Why do women wear that shit? Men don't care about perfection. We care about real." He liked the smattering of freckles on her nose. He wondered about the thin, faint scars next to her left eye. They eluded some childhood misadventure and made him smile, thinking that she must have been like as she was a girl. His quiet admiration was interrupted when Kimberly looked at him like she was struggling with what to say. "I'm sorry if I said too much," he offered. She took her head with a small smile. She shook her head, her eyes steady even though her mouth trembled slightly. "I'm finding I enjoy honestly lately. Since Claudia, my grandmother, helped me start telling the truth to myself, I want it from others." He was curious, and though he didn't normally pry, she looked like she wanted help. "Is there anything you want to tell me about that?" he said gently. Her eyes looked startled for a moment. Then she looked down and took a deep breath. And another. What could be so nerve-wracking, he wondered. He saw her small shoulders set. What decision has she made? He didn't have long to wait, but he could never have predicted what she said next, nor his reaction. She gazed at him, eyes wide, and said, "I've been wondering if you could be my lover," she added in a rush, "and help me learn how to enjoy sex." He was thrown back in his seat and his vision blurred. What the hell? At any other point in his life from any other woman, it would have been a dream offer, sexual fulfillment without obligation. But not from her, no, not from her. He wanted more. He wanted to give more, and he thought she'd finally seen he could provide more. He felt hurt, insulted, all his newborn plans blown to bits. Then his vision cleared and he looked more closely at her. Her beautiful eyes were open, vulnerable, soft, inquiring, shocked at his reaction but still reaching out for help. This is risky for her, he thought, not trite. Then it dawned on him. Why had she reacted to his desires so negatively? I used to frighten her, he realized, with a sick feeling. Why would a woman be afraid of a man's desire? His mind filled with images repulsive, abhorrent, and abominable. And intuitively, he knew the truth. He wanted to kill whoever had harmed this precious creature. He was suddenly overcome with compassion for her and a compelling urge to help in whatever way she could let him. This is a compliment, he thought. She feels safe enough to explore with me. Amazing. Beautiful. He suddenly silently commented, I will show her a new world. He breathed deeply and slid his hand across the table, palm up. He waited, and after a moment she put her soft, small girl hand in his hand, and he held it in there with his thumb. He searched her eyes for any hint of manipulation or strategy. His conclusions were valid when he found none. Gently he said, I would be honored, Kim. A sparkle came to her eyes as she smiled shyly. Talk about first. Who is this miraculous woman? Mike wondered why Karen was nervous. She asked, will you try it with me? Sure, why not? What do we do? Holding her note, she said, first, we acknowledge that we both had valid needs, important needs. In this case, your need for good home-cooked meals, and my need for less to do at home during my crazy school days. Oh, definitely. By the end of the week, you're a walking zombie. You shouldn't have to do anything else, he responded, and saw a look of surprise. What? Mike asked. She shrugged. I'm shocked. You never acknowledged that before. He thought about that. She was right. How come I can say that now? Oh, I couldn't. I was too busy defending my need for unprocessed food. Karen smiled. She laughed at and shook her head. What? He prompted. Karen smiled. Claudia said as much. When a man has to defend his needs, he can't focus on anything else, like solving the problems for both of us. This gets interesting. I love solving problems, especially for you. Do you want me to figure this out? She nodded but held up her hand to slow him down. Yes, I do want you to solve it, but let's try making a deal the way I was taught today. Okay, what's next? We take turns saying, if I had it all my way, and describing that scenario. That sounds like fun, but a little unrealistic, Mike interjected. It's not supposed to be realistic. It's supposed to help us express our heart's desire, to ensure we make a deal about what matters most. He smiled and touched her knee. Good, that's what I care about, what matters most to you. She looked encouraged. When it's our turn to say our way, we're supposed to add what having it that way would provide. Okay, do you want to go first or second? Claudia said the person who is the most upset should go first. Are you upset about this? He looked worried. She looked uncomfortable. Yes, it upsets me for a long time. Bummer, he thought. How did I miss that? Because I was too busy eating her great food and wondering why she was so tired. What a butthead. Oh, sorry, honey, he said, contrite. I get so focused on what I need, I sometimes overlook what takes out of you. To this surprise, Karen smiled. Then you must be a man, she said cheerfully. Huh? Claudia taught us today that men have an immediate relationship to their needs. Not getting them met is a real threat. Mike replied, of course. How else could it be? Women, when we're not in a masculine mode, relate to needs differently. The opposite for us. For us, we postpone our needs until the last possible moment, she shook her head. That's why I've never had a serious conversation about this. I've always invalidated my need for more sleep and rest and put them off until after those crazy weeks were over. What's the difference now, then? I learned too much about what going without my needs cost, what it cost me and you, she explained. I don't want to be cranky and tired and nasty and risk emasculating you. I gave that up. He was touched. She wanted to resolve this, ultimately for him. Let's get to it then. If you had it all your way. He waited while she looked through her notes. I wrote it down so I wouldn't chicken out, she said. He chuckled and patted her leg again. I don't want you to chicken out. Lay it on me, he grinned. Pun intended. Karen read slowly, afraid she was going to laugh. If I had it all my way, we'd have delicious home-cooked meals, my favorites, and I wouldn't be responsible for food at all, neither cooking nor grocery shopping, from Monday through Saturday of my crazy weeks. She looked up, expecting a scowl, but Mike merely looked interested. Anything else, he asked? There'd be plenty of food in the fridge to pack a good lunch, which means reloading on fresh salad stuff midweek. Anything else, he asked? Karen found herself pursing her lips like Claudia, a habit Kimberly had taken up in perfect imitation of her grandmother. No, I think that's it. Can I say what it would provide now? Sure, I know what your food does for me. I'd love to know what home cooking would do for you, Mike replied, his dark eyes warm. Feeling encouraged, she responded without checking her notes. Besides good nourishment to get me through a tough week, having food provided for me would make me feel supported, like I'm special, like I'm important. I think that feeling that would change the whole week for me. It wouldn't take that much out of me and required the whole weekend to recover. To her surprise, Mike took her hand and said, I love all your way. You are special and important. You're supposed to say all that way now, she said. He shrugged his shoulders. But I like your way. You deserve that, he shrugged. I have some problems delivering. I can go grocery shopping, but I can't cook like you. I don't know how to make your favorites. I can hard-boiled eggs. I can microwave and reheat. I'm pretty good with peanut butter and jelly. He said the perfect things. A solution was forming in Karen's head. She was about to speak, but Mike had more to say. If we could figure out how this upcoming week is actually a good one for me to take care of you, in the future we have to put your schedule on mine so I don't have one of my hell weeks at the same time. He shook his head. We've done that before. It wasn't pretty. Karen was thrilled. He never offered to coordinate his projects around her school schedule, and they had been double damned for it. She reached out and touched his jaw. He looked surprised. What did I say? She shook her head. It's not what you said in particular. It's how you're thinking. I feel like I have a partner. Mike's head cocked to the side for a moment. I always want to be your partner, he said sincerely. A warm feeling spread from her chest. I'm getting that now, she replied. I guess I needed to learn how to make deals, even without the solution hammered out. This conversation is amazing. Given what Mike had offered, she was now certain this would turn out, and she suddenly didn't feel like talking anymore. She set her notes aside and moved closer. She began seductively. I'm remembering something about how to jumpstart you. Kimberly lay in bed, stroking Lancelot, and thought about her evening. She would never forget the look of Jack and dismay on his face. He was authentically bummed, she thought. It had not occurred to her that sexual proposition could be a disappointment. Just when I think I'm learning to understand men, they do something unthinkable. It's a good thing I have Claudia and Karen. She was glad Jack had resolved it. She wasn't sure how, but she saw it play out on his face as he came to some peace with her And when he said he'd be honored, that gave her courage to tell him one of her cover charge requirements without a hint of insult. He readily agreed to be being tested and given a clean bill of sexual health. That would provide security and freedom for me, she said. Of course, he replied. She offered to be retested, but since she hadn't had a partner since her test many, many moons ago, he declined. He seemed to like the idea that it had been a long time since she had her last sexual encounter. He also agreed to discuss sex ahead of time on the phone. He laughed when she said it was too hard talking about it in person. Her embarrassment had obviously been increasing by the moment. What I really need is to talk to you about what I want to explore and what I'm not willing to do, she forced herself to say. That would be good, he responded evenly. That would provide certainty for me and I wouldn't have to be on guard. I really want to learn how to have fun, Kimberly had been commented to following the instructions. Then she asked, is there anything you need to give me what I'm asking for? He thought for a long moment and said, I need you to trust me, Kim. Kimberly wasn't sure which was more surprising, that he needed her trust or that she did indeed trust him. I wouldn't be asking for this if I didn't, she replied, and he nodded his satisfaction. Subject thankfully changed when their entrees arrived. She had practiced listening without interrupting and was delighted when Jack's stories about his childhood and career. More than once he had said, I can't believe I'm telling you all this. But she was glad he did. Hearing about his military father illuminated the premeditated that way he seemed to be to do everything. I bet he isn't surprised that often, she thought, chuckling now at how shocking her request obviously had been. She could hear the pain in his voice as much as he tried to conceal it. When he spoke about how his mother cocktoed his father, no wonder he's attracted to strong women, she thought happily, glad she didn't have to change that to be appealing. He'd finally insisted that she talk about herself and inquired about her father. She had flippantly answered the way she always did. I only met him once, she said. His name is Stuart Whitehall, of the Wisconsin's Whitehalls, apparently. My mom used to complain how she wasn't good enough for the mighty Whitehalls. She thinks that's why he split when she got pregnant with me. Jack reached over and squeezed her hand, making her realize that she had revealed more than she intended. She shrugged, and she'd chosen honestly. My lessons with my grandmother are making me think I only have a fraction of the real story. If men really are the providers Claudia said they are, it would make sense that my father wouldn't have a place. My mother won't let any man provide for her. He had smiled tenderly. Then you obviously don't take after her. As wonderful as the evening had been, saying goodnight had been awkward. To plan such intimacies in the future when they hadn't even kissed. What were the protocols for such moments? After much hemming and hawing on her part at the front gate, Jack had finally pulled her into his arms and kissed her warmly on the mouth. Even remembering it felt nice, not threatening, strong and safe and sincere, and a little thrilling, the way his arms enveloped her. The plan was for her to go over to his house next Saturday. At least, the very least, she'd get a ride in his Porsche. He wasn't sure if he'd have his test results by then, but it can't hurt to keep getting to know him better, she thought, realizing that she really wanted to do that. She fell asleep, wondering about their age difference. How big is too big? Claudia woke late Sunday morning to Bert sitting in the chair beside their bed. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said. She smiled at him and reached out for his hand. "Good morning, my love." He took her hand and studied her face for a few moments. His voice was a little rough when he said, "We need to make a new deal." Claudia was not surprised. He had made several comments about what the lessons were taking out of her, and she had known it would not be long before he objected. "I cannot stop," she said. "It's too important." Now, he replied. "You have to follow the process, and this time I'm going first." He set his shoulders. "If I had it all my way, you would revisit the doctor and make sure there's nothing physical we need to know about." She swallowed and surrendered. "And what would that provide for you, my love?" Bert turned his hand over and unconsciously traced her lifeline. "I would either know what to do or I could stop worrying about you. Medically, that is." "Okay," she replied simply. "I will make an appointment for next week." "And if you had it all your way," he prompted. "After making sure my health was not changed, because I do not think it was, we would figure out a way to accomplish this without exhausting me." "Deal," he replied, and firmly got up. She thought he was going to leave, but he sat on the edge of the bed and took her face in his hands. "I'm not done needing you, you know," he said, his eyes watering. She smiled and tried for a light tone. "And your needs are critical and urgent." He kissed her forehead, each cheek, and finally her mouth. "I'm glad you understand." After she lay in bed pondering, she could not stop teaching Karen and Kimberly. If she did, she might as well be dead. And that is the end of Chapter 6. On to Chapter 7. I'll do that as another Facebook Live. Thank you for watching, and I will all talk to you later. Have a great day, everyone. Love you. Bye.